Welcome back. Well, former Labor MP Michael Danby has unloaded on Anthony Albanese of the ALP's decision to formally recognise the State of Palestine. Danby is a fierce supporter of Israel, labelled Albanese and Deputy Richard Marles as Stalinist for suppressing debate on foreign policy motions at Labor's National Conference this week. Discuss it and more. I'm joined now from Adelaide by the host of Bernardi here on Sky News, Cory Bernardi. And once we iron out some technical issues, from London, former Foreign Minister Alexander Downer. I want to start with you if I can, Cory. Michael Danby's issued a statement and he says, and he doesn't miss, associating Labor with a homophobic, fundamentally undemocratic, kleptocratic, misogynist Palestinian regime is bizarre enough, but attempting to create the false impression that this is accepted by all delegates is worthy of Stalin. What do you make of this move by Labor?
Well, I think it's a very bad move, and it just shows how internally, no matter what they put out there in the public domain, Labor are controlled by hard left, anti-Israel groups. Albo is part of that. And also, I understand the puppet master behind all this is former Premier Carr, who was boasting about bullying the Labor Party into taking this stance. But what I find extraordinary, Peter, Michael Danby doesn't miss, and he never does. He's a man of great integrity, and I have enormous respect for him, I've got to tell you. But what I find extraordinary is the Palestinian Authority take money from the United Nations. They give it to people who blow themselves up, or families of people that martyr themselves.
They do.
They name stadiums after terrorists. It is just appalling. It is the most corrupt place on earth, and yet it gets more aid than anyone else, and yet they're perpetually the victim. It is just... it's a breathtaking decision by the Labor Party, but it just exposes their inner belly, and it's green and nasty and Marxist.
Yeah, and Cory's telling the truth there, because I was in Ramallah a couple of years ago and I took photographs of those statues as I was going into a meeting, I think with UN authorities, and they have a plinth outside and they have all of these shaheeds, martyrs' names on there. All embossed and venerated, basically, and their families are supported. I'll just go to you quickly, if I can, Alexander Downer. This is worthy of Jeremy Corbyn, isn't it, here in the Labor Party in Australia, to now come out in support and recognise Palestine. And Michael Danby, he's right to say it takes the Labor Party backwards.
Well, yes, of course, they're doing it for internal political reasons. That's why the Labor Party moves to do this. But it does break a bipartisan position, which has existed for a very long time. And you're quite right. Jeremy Corbyn had this position in the lead up to the last British election, but he ran a very anti-Israeli programme. If you want to try to contribute in one way or another to achieving peace in the Middle East, you want to ensure that you have good interaction with the Israelis and you have good and constructive relations with the Palestinians, something that we always were able to achieve. But ultimately, the problem here is that the Israelis provide a lot of the security on the West Bank, and if they didn't, Hamas would completely take over the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority would be controlled by Hamas, which is a far-left extremist organisation, a terrorist organisation, and the Israelis are ensuring that hasn't happened. But the Labor Party doesn't seem to take those sort of details into account. It's just virtue signalling for branches in Western Sydney.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. I want to go to the other issue out today that I found gobsmacking. Little old New Zealand, who was, I think, carried a lot of the time in these Five Eyes partnerships, but this is the Five Eyes nations. They've spoken out against the World Health Organisation's report into the origins of COVID. Even the WHO, and we know that Tedros Ghebreyesus himself was very much on China's side at the start. He has acknowledged that data has been withheld from the investigation team. But despite all of that, Jacinda Ardern's foreign minister has not come out and joined the Five Eyes statement. They've stood apart, and that's a highly unusual move in itself. Alexander, that's not a good look for New Zealand.
It's not a good look, and it's most unusual for New Zealand to stand apart from its other four partners, particularly to stand apart from Australia. But this is brutal commercialism at play. They don't want their trade in any way disrupted. They're frightened of China. and uncharacteristically for New Zealand. And New Zealanders are not cowardly or frightened people. They're great people. But their government is certainly showing itself to be cowardly in the face of China and not standing by Australia, which is not appreciated, but here not even standing by the World Health Organization on something that's fundamentally important. And, COVID has done huge damage to the world and killed many people. And you would expect there to be a proper and independent and impartial investigation into its outbreak. And China to provide the appropriate data. But as you say, even the WHO says they haven't provided the data.
Yeah, look, I find it extraordinary. I think it's, we've been lectured by their trade minister in recent times, and now they're moving on that. Cory, I've got to ask you about this Lex Greensill. David Cameron, former UK Prime Minister David Cameron, he and this guy Greensill, who runs a capital company that's collapsed, they were tied up in a commercial agreement after Cameron left politics. They went over there and saw the Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who we know has been accused of ordering the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist. But there was a big story around today that Greensill, when Cameron was Prime Minister, had a business card that he walked around saying that he worked inside Downing Street, a landline phone number. Now, I've been inside Downing Street. There's only about 5 or 6 staff. The fact that this bloke was out there pretending, or perhaps he was, working so deeply inside Downing Street, that's extraordinary, Cory.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary revelation. And let me say, for the record, politicians have to be able to earn a living afterwards, but there are lots of question marks around this. Should a former Prime Minister be shilling for a finance company to a regime that has just been accused of dismembering one of their own people in one of their embassies? Should a Prime Minister, while they're there, be giving an unpaid consultant a business card with a Downing Street email address so they can walk around promoting themselves as a senior advisor to that Prime Minister? There are lots and lots of questions, and it's not going to sit comfortably in the public space. I don't have the answers to them, but I just think there's got to be some probity here. And everyone in the business commercial community, I can tell you that now, knew that what was going on with Greensill was questionable finance. And I wonder why Julie Bishop was employed after Parliament, and I think maybe we dodged a bullet that the government didn't adopt some Greensill financing internally. I think that would have been potentially catastrophic for us.
Yeah, gentlemen, I've got to leave it there. I'm sorry. Alexander Downer, great to talk to you all the way from London. Cory Bernardi, as always, and we'll look forward to your show tomorrow night.
Thanks, Peta.